You know, as a police officer, I'm compelled to make this video. I've been in law enforcement for 10 years, and I'm speaking to my peers, other fellow officers, people in any kind of law enforcement position. I've seen officers nationwide enforcing tyrannical orders against the people, and I'm hoping it's the minority of officers, but I'm not sure anymore, because every time I turn on the television, every time I look to the internet, I'm seeing people arrested or cited for going to church, for traveling on the roadways, for going surfing, opening their businesses, going to the park with their families, or doing nails out of their own house, using their own house as a place of business, and having undercover agents go there and arrest them and charge them with what? With a crime? I don't know what crime people are committing by doing nails in their own house, but we're seeing this more and more and more, and we need to start looking at ourselves as officers and thinking, is what I'm doing right? Now, I want to remind you that regardless of where you stand on the coronavirus, we don't have the authority to do those things to people just because a mayor or a governor tells you otherwise. I don't care if it's your sergeant or your chief of police. We don't get to violate people's constitutional rights because somebody in our chain of command tells us otherwise. It's not how this country works. Those are de facto arrests. You know, we're violating people's rights and taking money from them, or even worse, arresting them and depriving them of their freedom when they are exercising their constitutional rights. So let's talk about that. Let's read something right here off of the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. Among these, we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their power from the consent of the governed, meaning our power and any government official's power is derived from the people. Okay? We don't hold power over our citizens. It's contradictory to everything that our country stands for. And this is what I'm seeing. First Amendment rights, telling people they can't go to church, freedom of religion. Okay? Telling people they can't protest, freedom of assembly. Fourth Amendment violations, illegal traffic stops to check for papers. What are you, the Gestapo? Is this 1930s Nazi Germany? You don't get to stop people unless you have reasonable suspicion or probable cause that they have committed a crime. And I know people that have personally been stopped saying, we want to see papers showing that you're essential.
David 2, copy a phone call.
That is not how our job works, okay? What really has been pissing me off lately is the fact that these officers that are going out here and enforcing these tyrannical orders, what they're doing is they're making my job and my safety, or they're putting my job and my safety at risk. Because what you're doing is you're widening the gap between public trust and law enforcement officers. And what that's going to do is it's going to, I mean, look at what's happened to law enforcement in the last 10 years. Less and less public trust, and more often than not, that is a result of isolated incidents that get blown out of proportion. Well, they're not isolated anymore. They're happening every single day. And the thing that I want you guys to realize is that our power that we hold as law enforcement officers is nothing more than a facade. It's a badge and a gun. And people, you don't realize, if you haven't lived in anarchy, if you haven't seen combat, things can be stripped from people in a heartbeat. And that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that these actions are going to wake a sleeping giant, i.e. the American people. Okay? They are going to be put in a position where they won't have their rights trampled anymore. And us as law enforcement officers, we'll have our ability to enforce the law stripped from us in about 10 minutes. Okay? I think what is going to happen if this continues is we're going to see bloodshed in the streets. Okay? I don't want to see bloodshed in the streets on either side of this coin. I don't want to see fellow officers get injured or killed, and I certainly don't want to see citizens get injured or killed. And I promise you, most of you out there doing these tyrannical acts against our citizens, you're not ready for combat. You're not mentally or physically ready for combat in the first place. I promise you, you don't want to go through that, and I hope I never have to go through that again. You don't get to just say, well, I'm doing this because I was told to do so, or I'm following orders, or I need to keep this job. Guess what? I need to keep this job more than anybody. I have 3 young children. I have 2 houses. Like, I have the same sob story that the rest of you guys have. But my personal choices and my living arrangements, no matter what they are, don't allow me to trample on people's rights. And I don't understand why that concept is so hard for people to understand. Listen, you need to stand up for what's right. You need to, if you're part of a department or an agency that is asking people or asking their officers or their deputies to impose on people's rights and infringe on their freedoms, you need to step up and say, no, that's not me. That's not what I signed up for, and that's going against my oath. And if that costs you your job, so be it. At least you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror at night. I've already expressed this to my department. And luckily for me, I come from a department that I feel like my chain of command shares my view, but I don't care what department you're part of or what your chain of command thinks. You don't get to trample on people's liberty. And so, as a special operations veteran, I've fought on the streets of Iraq under the U.S. government's guise of freedom. And I'm telling you what, the American people are going to you are going to wake a sleeping giant, and they are going to fight 10 times harder for their freedom on their soil than anything you've ever seen before. And if that's something you're willing to face, then keep trampling on people's rights. But I promise you, the American spirit of defiance is going to rise again, and it's going to be a big problem for our country. So I'll leave you with this, something that I learned as an E-nothing in the Army. No matter what situation you're put in, if you look inside yourself and ask yourself one question, am I doing the right thing? You ask yourself that, you know the answer. And no amount of money or no order or law or anything should be able to make you go against doing the right thing. So I'm imploring officers to look inside themselves and ask themselves, is this what I want to be doing to my citizens? And I think the answer is clear. And if we all stand up together, guess what? It'll be a non-issue, no factor, because people and law enforcement will be united like we should be.
Now, if a character has a desire, that means he often has a competing internal desire, which often comes from a past trauma that usually is explained at the midpoint. It becomes very scientific and very methodical, but that doesn't mean it's any easier to create. So I'll have certain colors that represent when the character will acknowledge his inner trauma.
Gray State is shot everywhere, but mostly it's shot in a studio. But you'd never know looking at the footage. All this buzz that people have for Gray State, we didn't start it. The story is, the farther down you go, the story becomes bigger and it involves more people. It involves generations and generations of Americans and everyone else playing their part leading up to this moment. So yes, once you begin to connect these dots, there's no way you can't tell a story about it. My name is David Crowley. I'm a filmmaker from Minnesota, and I've been working on the project Gray State. And so far, it's just a concept trailer, meaning that it's not an actual feature film yet. It's an idea that we show, to help a possible investor or a studio or whomever visualize what our idea is all about. So basically, it's been an exercise in developing the themes and really getting the visuals across, and showing A, that we can that it's a good idea and that's something that people want to see, and B, that we can actually pull it off. So it's both a resume and sort of a pitch to anyone who's looking. And this is now a marketing tool that we can take to a studio or a possible investor, or just put online so people can see it. And that's been one of our main goals, is to get 1 million views. That's investor bait, and so far so good. It's up to like 170,000 right now, and it's been a little over 2 weeks since it's gone up. We've just released our press kit, so we're about to start emailing and actually actively pushing the trailer instead of just letting it go viral. So far it's just been Facebook shares. So what you're telling me by sharing it on Facebook is that it's something you want to see, and that's telling me that, yeah, this could be a good movie, and it's commercially viable. And with the right financial backing, we can actually make it happen. How people wake up to liberty, and that is the term we all use, right? Wake up, because these things go on all around us all the time, and most people know about everything. Any one of these issues, you ask anyone, they've heard about it to some degree, but it requires sort of an awakening context by which they can establish the difference between that reality and the one that they live in. So for me, I was in the military from 2004 to 2009. I was stop-lost for 15 months. I was deployed illegally as a civilian for a while. So I know what it's like to be a number on a page, and I've seen what our military is capable of when it thinks it's peacekeeping. I've seen the division between the military being used as a blunt instrument of foreign policy, as it should, and being a domestic police force, which it shouldn't. And so I have seen the context. I've seen the contrast between one reality and the other, and basically, it was my military experience that helped me to decide and value liberty. Liberty is a real thing, and it's being threatened, and it's not defined by our creature comforts. There's some other thing that goes on, and it's about freedom, really. And are we free? And once you have that context by which to describe what I call the gray state, that's what the gray state is, then you can begin to wake up to your reality and say, hey, this stuff isn't right.
Yeah, gotcha. Was there just something, you said a little bit before that you've been writing this for kind of 2 years or whatnot. What triggered just the gray state? I know liberty and all that, but just the whole martial law, gray state, was there something that just...
It's all research based. Once you start to open your eyes, read a couple books, Google something, Google any one of these terms that you see in gray state, FEMA, martial law, RFID chip, the future rise of the Patriots. This stuff is all in there, and it's all widely available. And once you start to decide that this is not just conspiracy and that I should probably pay attention, bam, you're in the world, and there's no end to it. And it's that research that said, someone needs to tell this story, So there has to be a narrative in this, and I'm sure people have tried. And that's why it's taken me 2 years to sort of condense everything into one storyline, because there's 100 different ways by which the federal government will end this country. And I had to pick what I thought was the most realistic scenario, and that's kind of what the gray state is.
Whenever you were writing it, was there anything that you thought maybe I should look back on? Or?
That's a very good question. Well, anyone who opens their eyes to this material has that month or so when they're just afraid, and they go outside and they're like, it's going to happen tomorrow. Look at all these fools. They don't know what's coming, and it's like you're just afraid of everything. I got over that like everyone else does, and I realized, well, there's some time at least. And so I was able to, bury myself in the film effort and really try to craft that narrative out of the mess that I was researching. Now, do things really scare me about the gray state? Well, hell yes, they do. Now, the follow-on question to that typically is, well, why are you making a movie? That's your response to knowing the truth about this awful, dark, crazy world we live in? Well, I think that everyone needs to act within their own capacity. I'm an artist, I'm a storyteller, I'm a filmmaker, so I have to do something, and if telling this story helps people to wake up, and that's what people have largely told me, then that's what I'm going to do. Now, as far as what scares me about it, well, with what is coming, you and I are aware of this, with what is coming down the pipe, yeah, we are all going to face some very terrifying shit in the next maybe even couple months. Who knows? I'm not a fortune teller. I can't tell you that. But something is coming. And at the very least, we all have to meet our own demise someday anyway. That's something to be scared of, or maybe not. Maybe we can just achieve a sort of spiritual maturity in which we can face our own deaths, because in the end, that's the worst they can do to us. The thing that scares me about Gray State is that that may not be the worst thing they can do to you, is kill you. So that's where Gray State has taken me down that dark road. Death is not the worst thing. You know, the end of the revolution, it's not the worst thing. I mean, there are deeper things to you than your body. The Gray State is not by any means like a Christian film, but it is spiritual. Yeah. So defining the resistance and defining conflicts and defining how you will defend your liberty and your freedom and what that means. What am I as an intelligent, sentient being in the world? That's what kind of scares me, because they can take more than your life. I think everyone's got a vision about how they can best tell their own stories. And I think with today's technology, that's utterly possible. I mean, that's entirely possible. Anyone can basically pick up a camera and make their first film, get noticed for the quality of the storytelling, and move on from there, getting funding and getting attention from here and there. It's a ladder for sure, because you're not starting out in Hollywood with $1 million. It doesn't work that way. So libertarian filmmakers, you'll find yourself at odds with society. My film, my trailer has done awesome on the national scale. Locally, everyone is used to it. Everyone's used to me. They're tired of my politics. I don't know what it is, but it's been largely ignored. That's because, to the large extent, we know that the mainstream media has a liberal bias. They're not willing to even acknowledge these ideas. So it will be a challenge for young libertarian filmmakers trying to make their mark in film. But it's not like a dead end by any means. There's always hope, because, as Dr. Ron Paul says, freedom is popular.
What is Gray State?
Gray State is less a movie than it is a warning. We do not live in a dictatorship, but we do live in a police state. What we're going to see is the unveiling of this Gray State foisted upon America. Americans believe that they can't do anything. And day by day, they're becoming correct. It's a game of numbers, and we're losing.
And there's something about it that just kind of gets on you, and you just can't wash it off.
Credibility means nothing to me. What I care about is truth.
I don't think you're missing anything. The only thing you're missing is why.
about how things were. And then I woke up here.
We're far from cut and dry. Tonight, new and disturbing details we've never heard before. Tom Lydon of the Fox 9 Investigators has been given unprecedented access, and he's here to tell us what he's learned. And Tom, some of this will be very difficult to hear.
You know, some of it will be, but I think you're going to see that it's important at this point to really get all the facts out on the table. I think that's the most important thing here. For the last year, this case has become the subject of much speculation and plenty of theories on the internet, most of it completely wrong. The reality is the truth of what happened to David Crowley and his family is stranger and sadder than anyone imagined.
45S41, I'm in the area.
To the right of the RP sees dead bodies inside the house, dog inside, sees a gun in the house on the floor.
To look at the three of them through the Instagram filter of life, it's hard to imagine how it all went so wrong. David Crowley, a talented, promising young filmmaker, his smart and beautiful wife, Kamel, a dietitian, and their adorable 5-year-old daughter, Rania, living on a quiet street in Apple Valley, in a home that contained their many dreams and one horrific nightmare.
This is the ideal family, seemingly, and everything went terribly wrong.
My impression is it was very intense in the early days of this investigation.
Apple Valley police recently closed their exhaustive year-long investigation, and for the first time are sharing their findings with the Fox 9 investigators.
As you sit here today, a year later, do you have an idea of what those final moments looked like?
It was horrifying. You have a tragic loss of an entire family. It looks like David snapped and took the lives of his wife and daughter, and then ultimately himself. And it was a very sad scene, you know, during the holidays, a beautiful family, and just tragically lost.
And from the start, it was a case wrapped in suspicion and mystery.
Here's the red flags.
With paranoid theories all over the internet.
Guys out here going after the truth get knocked off.
That the Crowleys were murdered as some kind of government conspiracy.
Did the government want to silence him and his film?
All because of a personal film project David Crowley had worked on obsessively for years, called Gray State. This is a concept trailer for Gray State, which imagines the U.S. government taking away all our liberties, FEMA turning into a militarized, occupying police force.
In short, the Gray State is the culminating manifestation of the darkest trends our negligence and malignancy have to offer.
Producer who murdered his wife and daughter before taking his own life.
But the murder-suicide a year ago was far from cut and dry. Tonight, new and disturbing details we've never heard before. Tom Lydon of the Fox 9 Investigators has been given unprecedented access, and he's here to tell us what he's learned. And Tom, some of this will be very difficult to hear.
You know, some of it will be, but I think you're going to see that it's important at this point to really get all the facts out on the table. I think that's the most important thing here. For the last year, this case has become the subject of much speculation and plenty of theories on the internet, most of it completely wrong. The reality is the truth of what happened to David Crowley and his family is stranger and sadder than anyone imagined.
45S41, I'm in the area.
Do you think had to do with the film?
I think a great deal. From all accounts, he was consumed with producing this film, and it was a dark topic. Here you're talking about conspiracy theories and potentially the fall of society, and if you're focusing on that day in and day out, and those are materials you're working with, and you're filming exclusively on that topic, that can take you to a very bad place.
So you think he literally went down the rabbit hole of these conspiracy theories and just couldn't separate himself from it?
I believe so.
In the summer of 2014, Crowley traveled to Hollywood to meet with producers interested in Gray State. But by fall, the deal had fizzled, and the couple began withdrawing from friends and family. Kamel had told her family she was the sole breadwinner, that she was not physically or emotionally abused, but the financial struggles made her question the marriage.
He just lost his way, financially lost his way, life, stress.
When his friend Mason Hendricks stopped by to see him, it was like meeting someone he didn't know. David wouldn't even invite him in the home.
He looked like he literally was sleeping, and breathing on his computer. Failure was not an option for him.
By October, the family was essentially cut off from the world. David and Kamel stopped talking to their families, asking everyone to stay away, even changing their phone numbers. David's brother left their Christmas presents on the front step to avoid a confrontation. And there the gifts stayed for 3 weeks, until January 17th last year. Concerned neighbors discovered the 3 bodies looking in the front window. A sliding back door was found slightly ajar, apparently for the family dog. But there were no footprints in the snow, no sign of forced entry. Inside, detectives would find a scene of domestic horror and normalcy. Teasing little love notes the couple left for each other around the house, an innocent child's room. Much of the crime scene itself we will not show you. All 3 bodies were found in the living room next to each other. They were badly decomposed and scavenged by the family dog. Judging by the mail piling up and a paper in the home, the murder-suicide took place the day after Christmas. David shooting Kamel twice in the head, Rania once, before shooting himself. Between their bodies, a Quran with pages torn out, opened to a traditional forgiveness prayer. And there on the wall, above the bodies, scrawled in blood, the words, Allah Akbar, God is the greatest.
Who wrote Allah Akbar on the wall?
He did.
In her blood?
Yes.
Why did he do that?
We believe that was just kind of a parting shot.
To who?
Probably at her for having a Muslim past.
David did not kill himself right away. He left a trail of footprints, tracking Kamel's blood through the house. In the living room, his bloody fingerprint is on a laptop, open to a text file with only a single sentence. I have loved you all with all of my heart. In the home office, on a notepad, more bloody fingerprints and the words, submit to Allah now.
This is a person that was not thinking clearly, committed a horrible act by taking those lives. And his mind at that point was deranged. He just was not in a normal state. He wasn't thinking rationally.
What do you make of him scrawling Allah Akbar?
That, I believe, that's David being sarcastic. That's him possibly throwing a jab.
A jab at Kamel's family?
Possibly.
Kamel, who was born and raised in Pakistan, had converted from Islam to Christianity when the couple married. He was in the army, she was in college, but religion never seemed to play a significant role in their lives, according to family and friends. Allah Akbar they see as a twisted riddle, like something from one of David's scripts. A plot twist without resolution. We may never know what made David Crowley finally snap. Certainly the conspiracy theorists will fill in some of those gaps. But we do know this, there are some 1,500 murder-suicides in the U.S. every year. They account for about 5% of all homicides, and their numbers seem to be increasing.